fog, low and thick as jelly, enveloped the city. The rain, cold and endless, turned the streets into swirling streams of mud. I walked, chilled and hungry, my stomach rolling like a hungry beast, and the smell of fried meat coming from around the corner became my only guide. In this endless gray desert, the sign, barely visible through the curtain of rain, promised salvation, shawarma night. The place was small, sandwiched between two tall, gloomy houses, from the windows of which only an occasional dim light filtered through. Inside, behind the dirty glass, I saw a man, or what was left of him. A figure wrapped in a voluminous apron was fumbling behind a counter. That looked like a funeral plaque. His face was not visible, only his hands, fast and precise, like those of an experienced surgeon, worked with a kind of inhuman diligence. The smell was terrifyingly attractive and repulsively disgusting at the same time. The pungent aroma of spices mixed with the sickening smell of rotten meat and something else, inexplicably terrible, reminiscent of the smell of the grave. I went inside. The air was heavy as tar, saturated with the smell of spices, rotting vegetables, and something inhuman. The man behind the counter did not look up. His silence was not just the absence of sound, but a dull, oppressive silence, like a heavy coffin. "Shawarma," I whispered, my voice trembling. He did not answer, continuing his monstrous act. Meat. It was pale, transparent, with a lilac tint. It seemed that it was not meat, but something else, something inhuman, that replaced it. I noticed shiny particles in it, like fragments of bone. And then I realized. He wrapped the shawarma in yellowed paper, and I paid. Outside, I took a bite. The taste. It wasn't the taste of meat. It was the taste of earth, blood, and something else beyond description. The taste is sweet and salty with a sharp taste of metal and rotting residues. I couldn't swallow it. I spat this horror on the ground and threw up. In the place with the contents of the stomach, I saw something unusual, a small, perfectly preserved ring with a black stone. The stone glowed with a dim light, like a smoldering coal. I ran without looking back, all the way to my apartment. My heart was pounding in my chest like a bird in a cage. I locked all the doors and closed the windows, but the horror did not go away. It penetrated into every cell of my body, this taste of earth, blood, and the inexplicable horror that lurked in the shawarma. And at night I had a dream. I was standing in front of that very taste insult in the form of shawarma, but now it was big, gigantic, like a monster, and out of it came hands, pale and skinny, with long, sharp claws, reaching for me. And I knew that there was more than just meat in this shawarma. It was a ritual, a sacrifice, and I became the next victim. And this ring, it was the key. This horror will not go away. He will stay with me forever. This taste of earth and blood. And in the very depths there is something inexpressibly terrible, which is hidden behind the attractive smell of spices and fried meat. And at night I hear a whisper. The whisper of someone who cooks shawarma. Forever and ever. The ring, spat out along with the remnants of that nightmare, which I called a shawarma, lay on the bedside table, emitting a dim, ominous light. It was as cold as ice, and it was disgusting to touch it, like holding a piece of dead flesh in your hand. I knew he was the key, but to what? And what does this incessant whispering mean, which I now heard not only in dreams, but also in reality? The nights became unbearable. Sleep did not bring rest, but new nightmares full of pale meat, dim light, and endless whispers. The days were no better. In every smell of fried meat, in every rustle of paper, I felt the presence of the horror that I experienced in that damn shawarma. I started researching. I was looking for information about the ring, about the symbols engraved on it, about rituals that could be related to the horror that I had experienced. I spent sleepless nights reading books, on the internet, in archives, and I found something. The legend of an ancient deity who fed on fear and despair, and who woke up every 100 years on the night of the full moon. Sacrifices were offered to him in the form of special dishes prepared according to an ancient recipe, in which meat, spices, and something else were mixed. Something inhuman. The ring, as it turned out, was the key to this ritual. He was opening a portal, or passage, into the world of this deity. And shawarma. It wasn't just a shawarma. It was an altar. I realized that I had to prevent the ritual. I must prevent the awakening of this deity. But how? I was alone, against an unknown, inhuman force, on the night of the full moon, armed only with my ring and my fear. I returned to that damn shawarma shop. The fog was even thicker, the rain even heavier, but it didn't matter. The important thing was what I had to do. I found him. He was sitting behind the counter, wearing the same dirty apron. His face was hidden under a hood, but I could see his eyes. eyes full of cold horror and unquenchable hunger. And I knew that this was just the beginning of my own struggle for survival, against what lies behind the smell of fried meat, behind the dim light of the shawarma, against what feeds on fear and despair. And I was ready. I am ready to join the battle that could determine the fate of not only mine, but the whole city, the whole world, because behind the taste of pale meat, behind the dim light, there was something immeasurably more terrible, something that fed on our fears. And the whisper, it got louder,